Hi, I'm Chris Younger. I run an investment bank in Denver, Colorado called CapitalValue Advisors. And we were fortunate enough to work with Mike Hester, who ran and owned Beacon Communications. We started as working with Mike back in 2010 and then completed the sale in late 2015.
15, correct.
And so I've been fortunate enough to be at the conference a couple of years. 2 years ago, right after Mike sold the business, and then this year, we had a chance to talk to some of the members, and thought we would share a couple of the highlights of the session, but also allow Mike to talk about your experience in selling Beacon. So I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions before I go into the highlights of the conference.
Okay.
And that is, when you think about the sale of Beacon, what was the thing that you were most surprised about?
You know, I would probably say just how it was so complex, the deal itself. And you had shared with me before we started down this road that a deal was going to fall apart two or three times. And it actually did. But I was also just so impressed with everybody on your staff, you know, and the level of the expertise that your staff has.
What do you think, as you think back on the process and what we went through, and particularly with Brad and Robin, Mike had hired Brad, who became the CEO and president of the business a year or 2 years before.
About 2 years prior,
you sold
yeah.
the company, and Robin had been the CFO for 3 or 4 years.
Correct.
When you think about the importance of having that team for your business before you sold the company, how would you rank that? I mean, how would you assess that and the overall success of the deal?
I think it was huge, absolutely huge. As it turned out, I really wasn't the one that actually sold the company. It was actually them. I had been out of the company for about 2 years. And I mean, I was still involved in the fact that I owned the company. And every quarter I would go back to the company. But for the most part, I was already gone. So when the deal actually kind of was coming through, it became very clear to the buyers that what they were buying was a complete package. It was huge.
So the buyer for Beacon was a private equity group actually located in Denver. And they have also been looking at acquisitions for Beacon to make.
That's correct.
Right?
Correct.
And I know you're on the board, you remain on the board and you remain an investor in Beacon. You still own a pretty good chunk of the business.
Correct.
As you think about acquisitions now at the board level, right? You're no longer the seller, you're now the buyer. What do you guys look at?
Well, once again, I've learned a lot through this as well. I've been surprised at how bad so many of the companies are. You have to excuse me, but that really is the truth. You know, if anything, just what they're not prepared to for this process. And I think what we've found is we have to work with these companies, I think, for a year or two before they can get ready.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we talked about in the session today was around the importance, whether you're buying a company or selling a company, of the preparation before you ever go down the path of putting a transaction together, right? Thinking about why it is that, what am I trying to accomplish, right? If I could describe the perfect outcome, whether if you're buying a business or if you were selling a company, how do I describe perfect, right? Not just the dollars involved, but also what happens to my team, what happens to my employees, what happens to my customers, what happens to the brand name, right? I know Beacon was a really important part of Colorado, the community.
Without a doubt.
And making sure that name still stood and meant high quality and integrity and all that, I know was critical for you.
It was very important. Ironically, it helped us to decide which company we were going to go with.
Yeah.
I felt more comfortable if we were allowed to keep our own name and keep our own who we were. What I didn't want to be was to be a branch office of another company. What I wanted to do was to remain to be Beacon.
And that goes back to, if you're selling your business, thinking about what's perfect, right? If I could describe that perfect outcome, and then being able to reference that as you're going through the sale process. I think likewise, as a buyer, being really, really clear about what you're trying to buy,
Right.
and making sure that you understand, hey, if I'm buying this business because of its geographic presence, as an example, that means that having the people that know that market on board, retaining those people, is going to be critical. And so if you're a buyer, understanding, hey, what do I need to do to make sure I don't lose that asset?
Right.
Or if you're buying intellectual property, right, it's a new product or something that you intend to sell elsewhere, hey, how do I make sure I protect that? Going back to the now as a buyer, so you've looked at a lot of different companies and some of
Correct.
them good and some of them not so good. How do you think Brad and Robin, right, Brad's the CEO and Robin is the CFO,
Right.
how do you think their roles have evolved after the acquisition of Beacon?
Well, I think the growth across the board of those two, myself, and everybody else involved, has been huge.
Yeah.
We've really learned a lot. And, you know, Brad commented during the meeting in there that he actually had a couple of jobs. One of the jobs was to run our company, but the other one was to help with the sale. So now he's got two jobs still. One, trying to find another company to buy and put that together, as well as, you know, to maintain our normal business.
Well, and we talked a little bit about it in the meeting, is the importance of integration. If you're a buyer of a company and you haven't done that before, it's a lot different than rolling out a new product line
Without a
or
doubt.
hiring some additional salespeople or signing a big account. You want to do a lot of planning as it relates to the integration of that business, right? When you think through, hey, all the way from people to systems to processes to brands to employee benefits to financials, there's a lot that goes into buying and trying to integrate a business. And I know, given the talent of Brad and Robin, that they're going to be excellent at doing that. But it's, again, back to lessons learned, that's a really, really important piece of that puzzle for integration.
You know, one of the other things too is the partners we've taken on. We have a board of directors, which we did not have prior to that, and the board has brought us tremendous experience. And you know, I think that's made us better.
Well, and we talked about this in the meeting as well. One of the things the NSCA is so good about is, you know, as a CEO or as a business owner, it's pretty lonely at the top.
Yeah.
But being able to talk to other business owners, and not only to share problems and experiences and get new ideas, but to get an objective assessment of your business from somebody else outside it, is really valuable in understanding what are the big risks in my business that I may not see, right? I may be oblivious to, that could get in the way of enhancing value, or hey, it could be problematic for the company.
Yeah.
So I think the experience of what you guys are doing here in terms of getting people together to talk about and work on their businesses is really, really critical.
I think you're right. I think once again, we have improved as a company, and each one of us has grown.
Yeah, no,
Because of
it's
this.
a great outcome. And
I would like to thank Chris for you coming out and joining us again.
Oh, happy to do it.
And I could tell by the responses as people left the room in there, everybody thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, listen, one of the best parts about our job that we do, we get to work with entrepreneurs, as you know, and you've met a lot of our other clients, but we believe entrepreneurs, I mean, it's the bedrock of the United States. When you think about what makes this a great country, it's, hey, the willingness of people like yourself to take a ton of risk. And so now you have, how many employees does Beacon have?
About 100.
So 100 families, right, that you've made careers for, right, and you've allowed them to fund their kids' education and create lives for themselves that are great, and they're working at a great company. So our ability, right, to work with guys like you and to see you be successful. I told the story in the meeting that 2 years ago, Mike asked me to come out and talk, which was great. And then we were at the dinner. I think it was the closing dinner.
Right, it was the opening dinner.
Opening
actually.
dinner, was it? Okay. And Mike had just sold the company, and you're typically modest, right? You never shared this with me. Mike says, hey, excuse me for a second, and then I see Mike's up on stage. And then Kiffy leaves, so I was all by myself at the table, feeling pretty lonely. Both of them are on the stage, and I remember this was one of the best moments in the history of our firm, was you and Kiffy given it was a big check to fund veterans programs.
Correct.
And I sent a picture of that back to our team, And I said, this is why we do what we do. This is exactly why we do what we do, to watch entrepreneurs give back. Because we found entrepreneurs to be some of the most generous people around. So,
well, obviously, I've been extremely fortunate, extremely blessed. So to me, it's part of it.
yeah.
To give back, if
Yeah,
you will.
it's pretty neat.
Once again.
Awesome.
Once again, I can't thank you enough. That's been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Appreciate
coming
it.
and joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.